Welcome back to the PetaPixel podcast. I'm Jaron Schneider, and I'm joined by my friends Chris Nichols and Jordan
Hey,
Drake.
everybody.
Hi. That was my line.
This is the first time we've ever done this.
Yeah.
No, it's not. So full disclosure, we actually recorded the podcast this morning, and we had. I've got to get close. We had some mic issues. Hey, Jaron, you want to explain?
Yeah. We had some. It's called mic bleed. We had a lot of it. As you can see, we're pretty close to each other, and our setup is not what I would call the most
Good.
Yes. It's pretty jank. I'll actually admit. Right now, Chris's microphone is being held up by a light stand that is precariously
taped to a tripod.
Yeah. So, I mean, it works. I hope it works.
For now.
Should be better than last time.
Check out Chris's Instagram for behind the scenes on that. I'm very proud of.
Yeah, it's brutal. But hey, we're doing it again.
Yeah.
It's always better the second time around.
Yes. We should also mention we are obviously...
Spontaneity is overrated. Go ahead, Jared.
We're not in our own studio. We are here in Sandpoint, Idaho right now. We're working on a project about Idaho, about photography in the area, and we just happened to be together to do it. So we're going to go ahead and do our podcast from here. We got a few news stories to cover as usual.
Frankly, the light's prettier now than it was this morning.
Yeah, it was right in my eye this morning. The other thing, the main story today is that we actually had a conversation with the director of the guy who's got the main mojo behind the Pixels camera from Google. He's going to talk to us
which was just announced today when you're listening to this.
As you're listening to this, it was announced that we recorded the interview last week. We hope you enjoy it. It'll tell you a lot about the Pixel and what they go into about designing it and what you can expect out of it. But with that in mind, let's get started.
Podcast.
Cartoon.
So, you guys can see. I know
It's
Isn't
beautiful.
It beautiful?
I didn't think it actually existed. It was like a mythical creature until this very moment.
This is the OM System 150 to 400. Now, this is actually not a new lens. This came out back in 2020, but it was so highly anticipated and it sold out like in 24 hours. Yeah. So honestly, this is the first time I've actually ever held one in my hands. And I'm
Chris Nichols, professional camera reviewer.
I know. Isn't it a travesty? That's how popular this lens was.
Yeah. I mean, they had to give it into the hands of people.
I guess that's fair. So, this is the OM System 150 to 400. This is an f4.5 with a built-in 1.25 times teleconverter. So, if we're talking full frame equivalents, this is going 300 to 800 millimeters. Then you've got the 1.25 times on top of that. And you can also use the teleconverters, the MC14 and the MC20 on this as well.
That's madness.
Yes.
I would disclaimer, you can do it, but it's madness.
Yes. But okay. So here's the thing. This lens was sold out. Nobody could get one, but now it is back. And that's what's exciting. That's what we're talking about. So you can now go to our link here. It's explore.omsystem.com
/PetaPixel.
I know it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. And you can now get it without delay, $74.99 USD. And I mean, it's a beautiful lens. I'm eager to play with this. It's actually way smaller and way lighter than I was expecting.
I know. Yeah. Looking at it, it really reminded me of like the big classic super tellies. And it feels similar to a lot of the like compact wildlife lenses.
I straight up dig,
but with way more reach.
I straight up dig this sort of like panda coloring that we got here, like the black zoom ring. You don't see that very often. Black rubber rings, yes.
It's like, do we want white telephotos or black telephotos? Why choose? Let's have both.
Dovetail cut on the tripod. I always love that on any sort of telephoto. So I'm eager to play with this. Anyways, we've talked about the kind of reach it gives you, but it's also 4.5 stop IBIS actually built into the lens. And again, when you are using a telephoto like this, having that it's not IBIS, it's IBIS in the body. And
OIS?
OIS.
Yes.
Yeah. Image stabilization in the lens. IBIS in the body, but they do work in conjunction, 4.5 stops. And you always want to do it combined. I think this is not any better than the ad read I did this
was
morning,
great.
But that's okay.
I'm just letting you go. I'm not stopping you.
Yeah, I know you're not. But anyways, 8 stops of stabilization in combination with, for example, the OM1, the IBIS in here, the image stabilization in the lens. That's fantastic. So very stable. And lightweight. I can hand hold this. No problem.
It's worth saying this is the last ad we're going to do for this, because after that, we're going to review this. We're going to do a full review while we're out here. Actually put it through its paces. We felt like we could do an ad read because we haven't shot with the lens yet.
Exactly. Yeah. So looking forward to that review.
Yeah. So make sure you're tuned into the channel for upcoming content. We already know what it's going to be. this lens. You'll see it soon. And thanks to OM System for sponsoring this episode. And if you would like to take a look at this lens and pick it out for yourself, make sure you visit a local authorized retailer, or you can go to explore.omsystem.com/PetaPixel and pick it up there.
And I didn't even spill any beer on it, but if I did, it'd be okay because it's fully weather sealed.
That was not part of the ad read, but that's okay.
I was just concerned about the.
Yeah. All right.
Just concerned about the.
All right. So here we go. We're gonna power through this. We can do it. I have faith in us, and I think our mics are gonna work this time. So let's talk some news. 3 stories this week. The first one that I wanted to get your guys' input on is a photographer from India. She has won a $109,000 US dollar. It's 100,000 Swiss francs for her photo series in the Prix Pictet Awards. It is the 10th annual Prix Pictet Awards, and this is probably the reason I bring it up is $109,000, 100,000 Swiss francs is the most I've ever seen.
Yeah, usually
for a cash prize.
Usually they're like, there will be a small cash prize, but it's really the exposure that's the beautiful thing about winning this contest. Not this time. No, this time it's like, you will pay your rent for a while. It's pretty sweet.
I've ever seen an award where even like the net that they give away to multiple people is $100,000. They say value sometimes.
This is interesting too, because it was a very select group of photographers that were actually in this competition. It wasn't like an open competition, right? I mean, I think it was 5,000 photographers.
Yeah, something like that. The way that you get into it is slightly unusual. You have to be nominated by one of their 300 global nominators.
Yeah.
So you have to
Art
know
critics, curators, photography experts.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to get your work in front of them, and then they have to deem your work worthy to be nominated. And then from that, the judging panel picked their winners. That still, even if there were 300 nominators, 5,000 total entries that were considered, that's a lot of pictures to go through.
Absolutely. But you also know that like it's going to be a fairly high caliber of photography.
That's exactly
right?
it.
And that it's going to span, like a lot of different tastes artistically throughout the industry. So it's actually really cool. And I mean, that's probably why the prize is so prestigious.
Well, and the proof is there because the winning collection of images is like beautiful. It's wonderful work. So clearly this works.
Beautiful harrowing portraits of an Indian family, and it was really nice work.
The other nominations are also spectacular. Like the finalists, I'm like, this was not easy for them to pick. A little bit of background on where this money is even coming from. The Pictet Group is a Swiss multinational private bank and financial services company that founded the Prix Pictet competition.
Swiss banks? Is that something that the Swiss do? Or they?
I don't know if they're known for it. They should be.
Yeah, well, they should probably work on that now.
After being in cahoots with Bad Men and James Bond movies for so many years, they're like, we're going to give something back to the photography community.
The goal of the reason I put this together was to harness the power of photography to draw global attention to critical environmental issues. This year's whole theme is called Human. So all of the pictures are portraits, either staged or propped or whatever, like, planned or candid. It didn't matter as long as you had a series that told a story. The winner, her name is Gauri Gill, and I recommend you take a look at the link in the description to go check out her work. It's really compelling stuff. And then also visit the website, which is linked from that story that I'll link you to.
And see the other entries.
Because they're really good. I actually looked and I was like, wow, these are all spectacular.
This is nice. So, I mean, this is what we want, is to see the industry supporting artists and actually providing meaningful support.
Yeah, like a living amount of money.
Yeah. And unlike some other contests, none of the winners were actually the critics or the judges are on the board or anything like that. So that's always nice.
Thus far, we don't believe she is one of the judges of this contest.
Hopefully it stays that way.
All right, moving on.
So this next story is interesting because Jordan and I have talked about this. So just to give some context before we get into the story, we did an episode where we talked about the worst things about all the major manufacturers.
Had a good thumbnail, did really well.
It did really well, right? And when we got to the company in question, Sony, one of our main complaints was really that they're...
I think the complaint.
They weren't keeping up with firmware updates on their cameras, right? A lot of their older cameras, we felt like they could have updated features, but they just weren't kind of getting around to it. The newer cameras are getting updates, but Sony is a company that still keep a lot of older cameras on the market and offer them for sale. So more than anybody else, the onus is on them to really support that older gear. And so we called them out on it. Are we going to take credit, Jordan? Is it our...
I think, well, let's get to the interview because I don't know if we want to take full credit for everything. It's not earth-shattering in some regards.
Yeah, so in a story that was published by LensVid, they did a video interview with a Sony executive.
Them at Photokina one year, yeah.
He interviewed the head of imaging products and solutions of marketing at Sony Europe.
And us at one point.
Did he?
True. Yeah.
That's neat.
Yeah. No.
Chris, can you pronounce the Jan's full name?
I can guess.
Jan Salman Legagnier?
Yeah, Legagnier.
At any rate, the question was asked, what is Sony doing about the requests for firmware updates? And in this interview, LensVid did mention, I asked you this question last year, so it's been a year at least since this has been on people's mind. It has only escalated in importance. And his response was, we know the need, the will of the market. I can tell you that the highest instances at Sony know about it. And the facial expression, the best I can do to describe it, is that he leaned forward and was like, yes, this is a real conversation. They actually have discussed it. And I'm wondering if it's also from his end, it's like they're encouraging Sony Japan to do something about it.
Yeah.
But a lot of these other markets, like Sony USA, Sony Imaging here, and then Sony Europe, and then Sony Canada or whatever, they can only do so much.
Yeah.
Japan is the decision maker, and if they decide they don't want to do it, they don't do it.
Yeah, and I think it's also important. Like Sony, they do a very good job of listening to their customers. I mean, that's never been an issue. We don't want to imply that they're completely tone deaf. To
some of the best they did.
Yeah.
They eventually do fix things.
A lot of the stuff that we bring up to them, years later, shows up in new products.
Yeah.
That's the issue. I mean, we should mention what our problem is with Sony firmware in the first place. And the big problem there is they've got, especially the two that always get called out, the A1, the A7S3. This is their flagship video alpha body and flagship Sony body. And a lot of new features have come out that are pretty cool, like their breathing compensation. Their focus map is a great way to manually focus, that has come out on cameras with the same processors.
Yes, absolutely.
And they're not bringing it to those higher end bodies. That's the big frustration with it. So yeah, it is a real problem that if you want to see the latest Sony features, you have to buy a brand new Sony body, even if it's a lower body down the line. Contrast that with something like Nikon, where they've brought out 4-5 major firmware updates.
You just had another one on the Z9.
Just another one. So by the time we publish this podcast, it will be public, but they are doing another update. It's the 4th one. And this one is it's minor.
Yeah.
But this is basically
everyone.
This is what they're asking for at Sony. They just if you add a new autofocusing feature to a new camera, put it in an older camera that's got the same processor. Yeah. So they're doing that. And they're doing that.
And it's a business too, right? You got to look at your return of investment. You got to see, like, it's not free to institute these changes into a camera. I mean, it takes development and software designer stuff. And so, you look at your return investment. I mean, we've talked about how Nikon's doing a great job, but they're also trying to win tons of market share right now and doing a really good job for that. So that makes sense. They want to ride that wave, keep the morale high, keep the market share going. Panasonic do a great job too, but they have a very loyal following of videographers, especially. And so it makes sense to keep a lot of the older cameras. People still
does
rocking.
Not Canon do this? Does not Canon, who doesn't need to win market share as the behemoth in the room, they do firmware updates
fairly major.
Relatively
sometimes
regularly.
It's actually new feature additions as opposed to like bug fixes and things like that.
Yeah, Sony doesn't. It's not what saying that Sony doesn't do firmware updates. They do. Yeah. They just happen to be
it's support for new lenses, bug fixes.
It's nothing like a new feature, like nothing like a new way to track autofocus. That's in a new camera. They just don't do that, and that's the complaint. I don't think anyone's asking for stuff that requires the new AI processor.
No, that's a hardware issue. They can't do that.
If you can't do it, you can't do it. But there are some things, like you mentioned, the breathing compensation, which does not require the AI processor, and as such should be in other cameras.
Yeah, I mean, why does the ZVE1, that's a much lower end body, have so many features that are not in the A7?
When you really look at
FX3,
it feels absurd.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at least they recognize it. They know about it.
Will they do anything?
At least one executive does. And so we'll see what happens. Yes, it's positive news.
Okay, last story. Apple has addressed publicly that they know that the iPhone 15 can overheat.
Oh, jeez.
Stop it.
No, there are specific circumstances in which it overheats.
Yes.
And Apple actually explains when it's happening and their fixes. This is, by the way, if you're watching us, this is Daisy.
This is Daisy.
Daisy rules.
Yeah. She's been hanging out here at the place, and she's a good girl.
Dog, for those only listening, it's a dog. So Apple has said that there were a pair of issues that were causing the overheating that was mostly problematic. Firstly, their I believe it's probably a memory leak issue. I can't say for sure, but some apps were overheating, and one of them was meta apps like Instagram.
Right.
Its use was causing the phone to get hotter than normal. On top of that, some phones had an iOS bug that would also do that. So if you got both bugs, or at the same time, your phone would get very hot very quickly. The meta bug has apparently been squashed. It was fixed on the 27th, I think. And then Apple says it will release an iOS update down the road. But they also wanted to make it clear there are several like speculative instances of what people were saying the reason it was overheating that aren't necessarily true.
Hogwash, I believe is the term.
Like a titanium frame.
Yeah, some people were they were saying that the titanium just doesn't displace heat well enough.
No one's ever used titanium, but
plus that's an outer covering. I mean, the inner frame was aluminum specifically. They said to transfer heat, and titanium transfers heat too. So that wasn't the issue. I don't think.
I mean, it is worth pointing out. We mentioned the heat in our initial review of the 15, and that sucker does get hot. But I mean, in Chris's case, he's testing the photo options, and he's got the camera with the camera app open, and you have to understand how a lot of it's not just Apple, it's all of these smartphones. As soon as you open the camera app, it is taking photos constantly and just throwing them away. They're in a cyclical buffer. So imagine that you open the camera app and you're just holding down the shutter button the entire time it's opening. That's what's actually
you're basically running video constantly, right? Like, and it only got hot if I did do that. If I just left it on, kind of had it in my hand, wandered around, it would start to get warm. And that's not how you normally take photos, right? At the same time, though, if you are shooting video, I mean, you had it got warm even after 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, it was uncomfortably warm when I was using the camera the way you would generally use a camera, especially when we were recording like ProRes files. Those are huge to test the log functionality on it. But I should point out there's also a not common usage where you accidentally leave it in video mode. Don't start recording, put the phone in your pocket. If you do that, a few minutes later, you will notice it's like there's a flaming bar of soap in your pocket. So just be aware. That is great. Something that could happen to you potentially.
But these are all like actually taxing it and using it in ways that are
exactly as opposed to this.
Yes. Yeah. So the other thing that they're saying is like during backup. So a lot of these problems were appearing when people were getting the phone for the first time.
Yeah.
So they were getting an iOS bug. They were trying to use meta apps, and they were also backing up and pulling from the cloud. All this stuff is like majorly taxing the phone, and that's why it was overheating. At any rate, they're planning to address it. I hope this addresses it fully. But one of the things that I feel like this I don't think we've talked about this before, but Apple must have made a concession here at some point. They must have been like, probably going to get a little warmer than it used to.
Yeah, right. But if you want this cool stuff, it's going to get.
Yeah. And Jordan has some of the hottest thighs I've ever seen on a man. And there's nothing Apple can't do anything about.
This is one more reason to watch the show on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. So drink it in, folks. This is why you should watch on the YouTube channel because.
All right. Well, that's an excellent segue to us talking to Isaac Reynolds. He is the subject matter expert on the Pixel camera at Google, and we did an interview with him last week. We're going to play that for you now, and if you've got any questions about it afterwards, make sure to put them in the comments because we're going to be sure to address those in the following episode. But here you go. Please enjoy. All right, we are joined by Isaac Reynolds. He is the subject matter expert on the Pixel cameras at Google. He's worked at Google since 2014 and is responsible for managing the team, overseeing camera design, research, and development. Isaac, thanks for joining us. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. I've been doing product management here for a long time. I like to remember it as 8 phones. This is the Pixel 8. I've launched all 8 of them, so 8 years on the team now.
Wow.
Dang.
Well, yeah, thanks for joining us, Isaac. Well, we appreciate your expertise here. Absolutely. So, I know for me, I guess the big thing is as a photographer, and I've used, I got the Pixel Fold right here, and I've used a Pixel 7 Pro as well. So I guess for me as a photographer, tell us what's really changing when it comes to the Pixel 8. What are we really going to be excited about?
Boy, as a photographer specifically, and I got plenty of other stuff for videographers.
Woo! Perfect.
Yep. But as a photographer specifically, the first thing you'll notice on the Pixel 8 Pro is it's a completely upgraded camera system. So every single camera on there is new. That means all 3 rear cameras, the ultra wide, the main, and the telephoto, all upgraded. Primarily, you're going to get more light sensitivity. So your low light photos are going to look a little cleaner, a lot better. Some improved autofocus as well with that extra sensitivity. And then I'm not talking a small bit either. We're talking 105% more light on the ultra wide, 56% more light on the telephoto, and then a new technology on the main called dual exposure, which is a dramatic improvement in high contrast scenes and shadow noise. The front camera, we're also adding autofocus, so you get the sharpest and best selfies ever on a Pixel from that. And then across the board on the rear, you have 48 to 50 megapixel cameras now. So you can get high resolution photography from all of those.
Wow. Okay. And are we talking more light aperture wise, Isaac? Are we talking larger sensors, combination of both?
Combination of both. Yeah. You'll get wider apertures on some of them, larger sensors on others, both on others. It's really upgraded across the whole gamut.
Can you put in like perspective, like what to someone might know how large the biggest sensor is on the iPhone. What does the Pixel compare to in that sense?
Oh boy, it's a tough comparison because for the first time this year, we're introducing on the main sensor this dual exposure technology, which is not a traditional tech spec, but it has such an enormous impact on the quality of low light videography in this case, that you can't really compare them tech spec to tech spec the way you used to. The technology is that impactful. So if you look at the top level tech specs, I think it's like on the main camera, 50 megapixel, I think it's 1.2 micron f 1.68. So it's a nice wide aperture and really big pixels. But that dual exposure technology makes a huge difference too.
So you brought up video specifically. I mean, we've certainly seen like how an Arri Alexa, Canon's DGO, or now even like Panasonic are doing, exposing the image at 2 gain settings to increase dynamic range. Is that kind of what we're seeing here?
That's very similar to what we're doing. You can imagine that there are lots of traditional ways to merge multiple frames. Usually you have to take multiple in sequence, but then you have all the ghosting issues and the broken lines if you don't do the merge properly. It's a very complex process. That's what HDR Plus in our photo mode does properly. And that's why it takes a couple of seconds to process a picture. On the video side, this dual exposure technology is really overlapping those exposures. They start at the same time, they end at the same time. You don't have any of those merging issues. And it happens to sort of expose at different gains depending on where you're looking in the picture. And so you get sort of the best part of the gain curve at all times on each pixel.
Cool. And will that impact photography as well?
That's in videography this year.
Okay.
Gotcha. So before we get deeper into specifics on things, let's just talk about, you've got a standard Google Pixel 8 and then the Pixel 8 Pro. What kind of differences can we expect on that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is actually not a difference. We think that everyday photography and videography matters to everyone, regardless of your ability to pay for a more expensive or less expensive phone. So we went out of our way to put the same main rear camera, sensor, lens, everything on both the 8 and the 8 Pro. So if you just want to take it out of your pocket, take some snapshots, you're going to get the same quality on that main camera. Yes, the ultra wide's a little bit different. There's no telephoto on the regular 8 camera. The selfie cameras doesn't have autofocus, so there are some differences. But for those everyday snapshots, it works really, really well. And then one of the big upgrades to the 8 this year is we're adding macro focus on the ultra wide. So now you can take those shots as close as 3 centimeters away and still get nice, up close, crisp detail, that sort of thing. That's the big upgrade this year.
But I think for using metric, we appreciate that.
The engineers use metrics too. Don't worry, if I speak inches around here, I get a weird look.
I've got a general, now that we know like this tech stuff, I'm just curious, like, so Google is what I remember as the company to make smartphones feel like that their goal was cameras very early on. The Pixel was going to be like, this is basically a point and shoot as well as a phone. That was like the mentality I got from Google from the original Pixel. Now that we're 8 generations in, like, is that still the same mentality? Like, talk to me about the overarching view of cameras with Google.
That's true. We spent a long time trying to build the best auto mode we possibly could. So professional capabilities in a single button, one tap interface, super easy access to those pro capabilities, and using things like HDR Plus, that technology in computational photography to make a little sensor act like a big one. This year is a big shift for us. This is our 3rd Pro phone, and we really wanted it to be a Pro camera as well. So you're going to see a big shift for us. And when I say big shift, I mean, this is one of the features that was on my mind since the week I joined 8 years ago. How do we do this? Is we finally introduced Pro controls in the default camera. So now we've tested all the edge cases that an auto mode will never do, from super wild out there settings for like ISO and shutter speed at the same time, and made sure that the computational photography knew what to do with those combinations. And that means you'll get all those traditional camera controls on top of the computational photography now. So you can set the shutter speed on the sensor, exposure directly, ISO, focus, and those sorts of things. So it's really a pro camera now, as of Pixel 8 Pro, along with being that auto camera we've been building for so long.
So if you're using those manual controls in it, is it still doing the computational blending of frames and things like that just in the background, even though you're exposing it traditionally?
Yep. And that was the hard part. That's why it took a long time to kind of get this out properly, because we didn't want to take away the computational photography. We didn't want it to be like, oh, I'm in Pro Controls and now all my results are going to be worse. You know, that's not what you want.
We've seen that before. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. We figured that like there's moments that matter and you want all of it. Like you don't want some of it, but not the rest. You want all of it. So actually the other thing you can get now is in Pixel 8 Pro, you can do Pro Controls at the same time as HDR Plus and computational photography, at the same time as zoom, right, on the telephoto, at the same time as new 50 megapixel output, at the same time as DNG RAW or JPEG, if you'd like that. So you can have all of them stacked on top now.
So I had a question there, Isaac, about, telephoto lenses. You guys have been doing it for a little while. Samsung's been doing it for a little while. Of course, Apple just launched their iPhone 15, their Pro, with a new 5x telephoto. And so this is kind of related into, has your telephoto lens changed at all on this new phone? And how do you guys deal with just such a small area, small optics? I noticed the bar looks different on the back now. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. And I actually start with a question. I can ask you guys this because you know photography. The typical lens you might use at a wedding, you've got your full frame camera, you've got probably your 24-70 and your
70-2, yeah.
72, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. In my parlance, in my words, that's like an 8x lens. That's no more than 8x. So it's still a 5x telephoto camera, because we can use the 5x from 2.5 all the way to beyond. And by just increasing the amount of light we're bringing into that lens, it's super fantastic for all of those everyday, typical conditions, people, family, pets, indoor sort of zoom photos. Because we think the light gathering, and like there's a reason those 70-200s are f2.8. We think all that's important. So really that's the big upgrade, is the light sensitivity.
How did you do that? Like, what's the goal? Like, so we've seen other companies do it, and it's just essentially just like, get into a brighter situation. That'll make it good.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Like, how did you make it brighter with your such a small working space?
Yeah, how do you fill it all into that space now?
It's funny. It's funny you ask that, because I like to tell people that like the difference between an f4 lens and an f2.8 is like the width of the lens. And then the difference between a 200 millimeter lens on a full frame versus a crop is like the length. So when you're increasing the size of the sensor and you're increasing the size of the aperture, everything gets bigger. If you asked me how it's all crammed in there, I would tell you it took a lot of people a long time. Other than that, it's like tenths of a millimeter. And like manufacturing tolerances, it's an impressive thing. I wish I could tell you more of the details, but I know it was hard for them. Let me tell you that.
So so this is my question. I can still touch on it. Like, how is it designed? So like,
I see.
I'll point to the iPhone. They did the tetraprism. They just bent the lens that we've seen periscopes out of Sony. What's Google's strategy here?
So we orient the it's a standard telephoto, but it's oriented sideways, and then and then we put a prism in front of it, so the light coming in gets bent into that long.
So it is a periscope, but not this way, but that way.
If the submarine was on its side on land.
Yes, thank you. For those only listening, my hand motions are not helpful.
I think of it like it's a bar. It's the camera bar on the back. It's all in the bar.
Okay,
right.
It's not like the bar goes left, and then down.
This is not a new thing, right? You guys have done this in a couple designs since you've had this bar, right? So is that really why the bar is there? I actually don't really know the answer.
Yeah, the reason the bar is there to fit all those cameras. That's what it's for.
Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Did Isaac? I know you love to take pictures. So, how much say do you get in that, or how does that influence like how you use this camera? Are you excited for those new manual controls? Is that something that you find yourself wanting to do more than on a standard smartphone?
I'll be most excited because when someday, I hope this is possible someday. I can't obviously talk about what we're investigating around here. It might not be, but I'm waiting for the day.
Carefully. Read between the lines. Here we go.
I'm waiting for the day there's aperture control, because I shoot my camera in aperture mode almost 24/7.
Me too. I'm really glad you brought this up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you finish, but I have a follow-up on this.
Okay. The only time I shoot in anything other than aperture is basically when I'm in an air show and I need like 1/16,000 exposure for some of those shots. So I'm less personally, I'm not going to be a big pro controls shooter. I'm a big 50 megapixel DNG shooter. I use that. So I was on vacation in Capitol Reef National Park. Shout out to anyone who knows Capitol Reef. It is the best of the Mighty Five in Utah. I'm sorry to anyone who likes Zion, but Capitol Reef is all I'm saying. I did a lot of 50 megapixel DNGs out there. That's my personal thing that I'm excited about. But so, I think the takeaway is like, yes, we're building a camera for a lot more people than just me, is the point, I think, there.
So before you go, Chris, because I did have the follow-up,
Yeah.
I dibsed.
I have a follow-up now, too.
You said aperture control, and we've seen it, kinda, in a couple. I think Sony mainly. I don't know if anyone else has done it. That there is an actual little shutter thing in there that will tighten it and open it. And the more I think that's cool. It's not true aperture control like we get out of like full-size cameras that gives us a lot of different options in there. It's just basically two. You get one or the other. But then I started thinking about it more. It's like, what is the actual advantage of that when we're working with a sensor so small? We're not getting really that much more depth of field, I wouldn't think, unless we're going to a sensor that's type 1, or as a lot of people call it, 1 inch. You're not going to really see that much unless you combine it with some focal length. So, like, what are the advantages? Why would we want aperture control in a smartphone? And then how would that even translate to, like, being visible?
To being visible.
Like, how would I see a difference other than, why wouldn't I just want more light gathering capability all the time and just control with shutter, which is what we currently do now?
It's a fair point. And first of all, I think you'd be surprised how much of a difference a little aperture can make. Like the apertures in these things are getting so wide that like 12 inches makes a difference. If you're holding your baby and they're like in front of you a little bit and you're behind, it can be difficult to get everything in focus, even at that level. So that's one thing. You don't need a lot to make a difference. And the other one that I think about a lot as a video shooter is I don't like using 1/1000 exposures in bright light at 30 FPS.
Yeah.
And I can do we can help a lot. We could, those sorts of technologies could help a lot with even a small range of apertures. But what we like to do, and because we're big computational photography people, is I don't want just 2 apertures. I want all the apertures.
Yeah.
And whatever blend of hardware, software, maybe someday can pull that off. I'm all for. Me personally, again.
So I kind of want to roll it back because we're talking about the future a little bit, but on this right now, I mean, one of the big things that excited me about Pixel in the first place was when Night Sight was developed. Have there been any changes to this in extreme low light?
If I go into that, we're going to be here another 15 minutes. And I think, Chris, did you ever get to ask your question? Otherwise, we're going to be on Night Sight.
We could probably tie it in together and make it a half-hour conversation again. Obviously, lenses, more light, bigger sensors, that's always key. But I mean, a huge part of the image making process is the actual processing itself. So I guess my question is, has the Pixel 8 processing changed in a way that we're going to see differences to image quality? I mean, portrait mode, stuff like that. And then, of course, that relates to night sight mode, I'm sure, as well, because that does play a big part in that too.
Yeah, on the photo side, again, 2 big things. One is we're the first Android phones to launch with what's called Ultra HDR photography. That's a new file format that kind of, the old sRGB color encoding really does not exercise the capability of a modern display. It's designed for like CRTs at 500 nits and like no color. So Ultra HDR will actually let you do less tone mapping, which means it's using the full brightness range of the display instead of tone mapping. And then you get more natural HDR, where the screen is using some of that extra brightness to kind of replicate what the real bright sky looked like. And it's a much more natural effect. And I hate to say pop, because pop is such an overused word in my industry, this industry, especially internally around here. So I don't want to say pop, but it looks a lot crisper and nicer. And then the other thing is, if you don't want that, fine, 50 megapixel DNG all day. And You can set as of Pixel 8 Pro, you can set an default editor in Google Photos now. So if you go into your standard gallery, you click edit, you choose whatever editor you want, it'll automatically launch that editor for your raw pictures now. So super well integrated inside your standard gallery. You go to Lightroom if you want to go to Lightroom. I'm a Lightroom guy, or anything else that's raw capable that you want to use. So whatever you want, Ultra HDR, or you want to do it yourself, you can pull that off.
All right. I guess now you could answer Jordan's question and see how long this will take.
Here we go. You want to talk night sight, and I want to talk video. Okay. So we have, for a long time, been introducing all this computational stuff in our photography modes. And sadly, sometimes exclusively in our photography modes. So we have been dreaming for so many years of bringing HDR Plus to video. And we got a little bit closer there with Tensor. We were able to do this thing called Live HDR Plus, which was like a fixed function block to accelerate what I called an approximation of HDR Plus. And I really did mean approximation. What we're able to do this year is bring the full HDR Plus pipeline to video. And, HDR Plus, it sort of takes 8 frames that are all taken next to each other and it blends them into one. So you get lower noise. It's like a stacking technology with some really tricky merging. So if you think about it for video, it's literally like I take the first 6 frames and I merge them into one. And then I slide over by 1 frame and take the 6 frames, including the 5 I've already seen, and merge them into one. And then I slide over 1 more frame and do that for the whole video. And we're calling that Video Boost. And it enables a new capability is night sight for video. And in the same way that the original night sight, it wasn't just lower noise, higher noise. It was now you have a picture that you didn't get before. That's what night sight video is able to do in video mode. Videos that you never could have taken before, you can now get clean, shareable, usable stuff. It's really, really nice. I've been really happy with it. It does have some tricks. You have to make sure that you open the Video Boost mode specifically when you enter camera. You have to make sure those files get uploaded. They have to get backed up. And then you can wait for them to process in the cloud, and then you can download them back down and watch them.
Gotcha. So it's not overtaxing the hardware
right
while you're recording. That makes sense.
Do you have any new video recording formats? Or are you just shooting in one way and that's it, or 2 ways, or whatever they are?
It's still a standard HEVC encoded output. You can use 24 FPS now in 1080p and 4K video. I don't know if you call that a format.
It's nice. It's nice to have.
It's still not a format, I guess I would say.
Frame rate.
So I don't think I'd say there are any new formats specifically.
So if it's not a specific new format and we're taking all this, especially like in good light, high contrast scenes or something like that, where we're shooting the two and blending them. So is that tone mapping it down to like a classic 709 kind of color space right now? Or is it saved as an HDR video file?
For Video Boost?
For Video Boost, or like you said, when we're using the 2 pixels and frame blending them in the video mode now.
That's all. Those are like under the hood technologies. So we see a big difference between what's under the hood, and I don't think we ever call it over the hood, but maybe I should start calling it. But the under the hood stuff is like dual exposure that we talked about, or Video Boost is under the hood. What you can get out of it, you can choose. Do you want HDR? Do you want SDR? It's your choice. Do you want 4K? Do you want 1080p? It's your choice. Mm-hmm. Those are like the over the hood things to me, because that affects how things work in third-party apps and third-party editors and ecosystem stuff. So it matters a little more to the user which exactly they're getting out. But the under the hood tech, we strive to make that under the hood, so it doesn't drive the user's options otherwise. So if you want 1080p night sight, I guess you can do that. I think I only ever do 4K HDR night sight, because why would you not do 4K HDR if you can? But that's me again.
On a related note, phones can be difficult to use. I always struggle ergonomically with how phones work. And so the camera app itself, I've got 2-part question for you. So the camera app itself, have you guys changed that or tweaked that in any interesting ways from the previous gen? And then how open is Google to allowing third-party apps to access a lot of this technology that you guys are talking about? And like, how far do you let them go to pull out their own kind of image quality and different interfaces they want to use?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially trying to use the camera apps one-handed can be really tough with these huge screens. They just they don't keep getting wider, they keep getting taller. which in some sense is worse for my thumb because it doesn't get any bigger in a year. So things just get further and further away from my thumb.
Yeah.
So I've gotten really used to operating a camera. I know this is not going to play well on a podcast, but I sort of grip it with
I'll
my.
describe it in detail what you're doing.
Yeah, it's like gripping it with my pinky and my forefinger and like squeezing it. And let me tell you, this hurts.
Yeah, that looks incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah,
really
it looks like the
painful.
worst chopped stick experience I've ever seen someone try to do.
But I get an extra like quarter inch out of my thumb, which is great. Anyway, point is, takeaway, we were able to redesign the whole camera app UI now to move everything closer to the bottom.
Okay.
So it used to be your options were at the top, now they're at the bottom. Used to be your sort of white balance controls were in the preview, sort of 2/3 of the way up the screen. We've moved those into a panel that's at the bottom.
Nice.
What we also did is we used to have this sort of side-to-side scrolling to switch between modes. And it was like night sight and then portrait, and then there was video stuff on the right side. We took all the video stuff, we moved it into its completely own separate scroller, and we created what we're calling a video super toggle at the bottom. It's just this giant video button right, again, close to where your thumb lands. So you can just say, I'm in video mode today, and I'm in photo mode today. And then once you're in video mode, you get all the video stuff and none of the picture stuff. So I think of it like that stills versus movie toggle you might get on a certain mirrorless camera that I happen to own and am a big fan of. But that's kind of why we did that, is we wanted it to be more reachable, and we wanted to give video that extra space. As for the third-party app store, it's sort of a different question. We do offer a lot of that technology to third-party apps through the standard Android APIs. So if you're building an Android app and you want to build something cool with Pixel, it's all the same API services anybody else has on Android. That's part of the beauty of the Android ecosystem. But we have our own versions that we offer through various APIs, things like stabilization or the ability to take two cameras simultaneously and do video from both of them at the same time, and some other stuff like that.
Cool.
Well, as we're getting near the end here, I guess what I want to hear from you, Isaac, is as someone who has not used an Android device since the original Droid.
Ooh, OG Motorola. I have one in my phone. Don't worry, I know that phone. My friend had one in college.
I'm sure I had it, and I don't know what I did with it. I hopefully got rid of it responsibly. It was a long time ago.
You should put it in a collection.
I want you to me, basically, everyone that's like me, who has been an iPhone guy for a decade plus, what can you tell me to sway me to bring me to Pixel? And especially speaking to me as someone who really puts a lot of emphasis on the cameras, but also just general usability, like how it connects with my other devices, just working in my everyday life. Like, tell me, convince me, bring me to the Pixel side.
It's a big question. It kind of stretches outside of cameras and photography as well. So you'll have to bear with me if I'm speaking a little bit outside my expertise on some of these things. But one of the things that I really see about Pixel is just the level of and the rate of innovation in Pixel is wild. I mean, there's Magic Eraser that we launched years ago, Night Sight, huge advancements. Night Sight in video is another enormous advancement, which is delivering the absolute best low-light video quality on any smartphone, including smartphones that we may have picked up in the last couple of weeks. So just in the camera side, there's innovation. And we haven't even talked about some of the new AI editor features that we're launching this year, like huge upgrades to in the vein, in the style of things like Magic Eraser. Some of it we previewed at Google I/O. That'll be Magic Editor launching with Pixel 8 Pro this year. But beyond that, the ability to screen calls. And I'm sorry, I'm a camera person, obviously, but like the call screening is my favorite feature.
Who calls anyone anymore? Every time my phone rings, it's not real.
Somehow I ended up, because I lived in Seattle, I moved to, I live in Denver now. So every time I get this call, I'm on somebody's call list from Seattle now. I don't know why. So I get like a spam call every other day. I know it's spam because it's a 206 area code. And I can just hit the screen call and I can like watch it read this message about, oh, you're on a Google answering service. And then they hang up. It's fabulous. And then if they engage, I just get to click, tell me more. And see what happens. And maybe I could click tell me more 3 times, 4 times. I don't know. It's entertainment for me. So there's tons of innovation in calling, in camera, in editing, all that stuff. And now you can buy Pixel Buds, you can buy Pixel Tablet, you can get Pixel Phone, you can get a Fold if you're a Fold person, you can get the A series if you're just looking for something super entry level and cheap, that's still awesome and really good quality. So you can kind of have it all. You can have your whole ecosystem on Google and have all that innovation. So there's never been a better time to switch, honestly, especially since a lot of these devices were launching this year. This is the first year there's been a Fold. This is the first year there's been a tablet. So it's a wonderful time to switch now and just take your whole life with you.
So you're saying that that's more compelling than a custom button on the side?
There's so many buttons on the sides of so many phones.
All right. Well, Isaac, thank you so much for joining us. It was lovely chatting with you about Pixel. We have full coverage on the Google Pixel on PetaPixel.com. And if you guys want to learn more about it. And again, thanks for joining us. And we'll hopefully catch you at the next Pixel announcement. We'll talk some more cameras with you.
Awesome. I'd love to see you folks again. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Isaac.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Isaac.
it.
All right, so that was it. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Isaac was really fun to talk to.
Yep.
He was a very good interview. You could tell how animated and excited he was to talk about
I
these
love when we
things.
talk to people high up that'll like say things.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
Like, offer an opinion.
And he's been there forever. So like
since the start of Pixel.
Yeah.
And you know that we're going to test this phone. So excited to get
I
it
think
for sure.
it's on the way.
I think
the thumbmbell for this might be you holding it because it should be arriving so soon.
We shall see.
Yeah, hopefully.
We shall see.
Yeah, if all goes well. All right, let's move on to tech support.
Cut that.
We've got so many of these that most of these that we're talking about this week are leftovers from last week, and I'm gonna probably have to punt a couple again because there were several of these that require a lot of our.
We will get to them. We're trying. We should just do a podcast episode where the whole thing is just tech
We're
support.
pushing the tech support boulder up the hill, and it just keeps
eventually it's
rolling
gonna
back
crush
in our
us
dumb faces.
Yeah. So let's start with
Smart faces.
smart faces,
Yes.
not dumb faces. Let's talk
Let's answer your questions.
email from Dave Bell. He sent us one in, and here's his question. I have a question / debate for you.
Thanks for making us fight, Dave. Let's do what happens here.
I'm considering a camera upgrade, and the two leading contenders are the Canon R8 and the Fujifilm X-T5. Sensor difference is his question. Is it better to have a 40 megapixel crop of the Fuji or a 24 megapixel full frame of a Canon? Obviously, the answer likely differs based on the use case. So how about these? Landscape photography, particularly long exposures of moving water. Night photography of stars and the moon. Low light photography, meaning cityscapes or city streets at night. Wildlife photography, birds in motion, and automotive photography. And then, so other than the obvious differences of lens weight and size and whatnot, which would you pick and why?
Okay, so here's the thing. I think it's good that Dave is putting out the reasons because I think when we talk
Please,
about
everyone do this. Tell us what kind
the
of
use
pictures you want to take.
cases, but he has a variety of use cases, and so
Quite wide.
Yeah, quite wide. And so this is tough. I mean, full frame and APS-C, I think it's the right tool for the right job. So I think APS-C does have a lot of benefits, especially when it comes to shooting things like wildlife. Automotive, I'm assuming, isn't just like ultra wide shots of cars, but maybe cars on the track in motion. And so I do think something like the X-T5, with its 40 megapixel sensor, I like having lots of resolution with long lenses, shooting wildlife. It gives room to crop and stuff like that. So in that regard, I think an X-T5 does make a lot of sense, right? Obviously with the low light and stuff like that, then we get into maybe an R8 makes better sense with the full frame sensor and the larger sensor size.
I mean, the thing that jumped out to me is outside of the image quality thing, and that's that the two use cases he mentioned are where the Canon autofocus is probably class leading.
Right.
Like vehicle detect, they'll actually focus on the driver, which we're not seeing in other ones, and it's incredibly accurate.
Yes.
We go back and forth a little bit, but I think our consensus at this point is Canon also has the best wildlife autofocus. So, I mean, what it comes down to, like, if you hit the shot, the extra detail will be great in the X-T5, but I think you're going to get more keepers in those really demanding situations with the Canon as well. Anything where you're dealing with low light and high contrast, bigger sensors just have exactly a one-stop advantage, and that's always going to be the case. So I would lean towards the R8 a little bit, but I would also say these are two totally different handling cameras. So do you like the, more manual dial, kind of like that classic film SLR experience of the X-T5, or do you prefer, a mini DSLR, which is really the direction Canon's gone?
Sure, and I think that brings up a good point, is that it's not just you can't just have a discussion about sensor size when it comes to photography. You can't just talk about APS-C or full frame. You have to consider the platforms that they're attached to. And as you say, the R8 is probably your best choice because you are wanting to do the low light stuff as well, and it has the autofocusing chops to handle the faster action. So, when we talk about sensor size, we're talking about maybe where they might be better suited. The APS-C sensor is giving you the extra crop, longer range on your telephoto stuff, but you always got to consider everything about it. What lenses are available? I mean, Canon makes some fantastic lenses but Fujifilm have very bright lenses as well, given that sensor
and they have
size.
a bigger overall lens
They
lineup.
do.
If you do wind up going to Canon, I would just look long and hard at your favorite focal lengths. Make sure they're covered because we're still waiting for third-party lens support, which Fujifilm has just expanded dramatically
Yes.
with Tamron and Sigma. In the last
And we're
year,
still waiting for Canon to
you've
do
got
that.
like almost twice as many options.
So yeah, hopefully that helps. I think we're all Team R8.
I would go Team R8.
Yeah. Team R8. Okay.
You like Canon, so
I am a Canon shill, through and through.
Well, there you go. So Canon
I
all the way.
would, and even with if you didn't have to explain, I would have just said go Canon. Okay, so next one is a SpeakPipe question from Logan Zachary.
Oh.
Hi, I've got a question about 85 millimeter lenses. I do Franklin expedition research as a hobby. I got a newsletter about the shipwrecks, Erebus, and Terror, and so I'm usually in a museum or archive, dimly lit. No tripods allowed, no flash photography, and I'm either shooting through a glass cabinet to get a detail on something, or I'm in the basement with an archivist and they're bringing out 1800s Franklin relics for me to write an article about. And so I need big apertures and I need fairly close focusing distance. And this summer in England, I went Jordan style. I just brought a 135 and a 35 Sony GMs, and that worked excellent. That Sony 135 in particular allowed me to get shots of the daguerreotypes. See the article by Matt Grokut at PetaPixel a few weeks ago. And so by the time I got home, I had started to think, I could have used something right in between a 35 and a 135. And I went out to buy an 85 millimeter with roughly the same specs, f2 or better, and a magnification of 1 to 4 or even 1 to 5. And I can't find an 85 millimeter that can do that. I checked Sony, I checked third party. I was even looking at Canon and Nikon, wondering if I had gotten into the wrong lens mount. And so I'm wondering, is this something that existed in the film SLR days and just nobody's made one yet for mirrorless? Maybe the rumored Sony 85 1.2 is going to do this for me? Or is this just the Achilles heel of the 85 millimeter range, is that you always have to choose between bright or close focusing? Appreciate you guys taking questions. Been following you since the Camera Store days. Love the Eva podcast now. Thank you.
So I love an 85 millimeter. I think
your favorite
that
focal
is
length,
my favorite focal length. And so there's not that many choices, unfortunately. I mean, that's the thing, right?
It's
I mean,
very
Logan,
specific what he's looking for.
Yeah.
It's tough because he mentioned E-mount, like some of those Sony options, and I'm glad he's willing to look at other mounts because, not a lot of really close focusing 85s for E-mount, but one immediately exploded into my mind, and it's one of your favorite lenses.
Yes.
Is Canon has their RF 85 f2, which
Macro.
is a half-life size 1 to 2 macro reproduction on it, and it's a lens that it's sharp.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, don't get us wrong. It's not that Sony doesn't have tons of 85 mils available for it. It's just the combination of 85 millimeter with a macro capability for what he's trying to do. I mean, the other option is you could just go old school. You could get some of the older SLR macro lenses. I mean, there's some interesting 90s. There's an interesting 85 that
The
Tamron makes.
Tamron 85 SP is one of my favorite DSLR lenses ever made. They might be a little tough to find right now, but the beautiful thing, if you already have a Sony, you can adapt that. Manual focus is probably how you're planning to work with it anyways.
Exactly.
And I
It
can
wouldn't-
definitely vouch for
you
that.
can't adapt it with autofocus.
You can, but it's adapted autofocus is getting better every day. But I wouldn't depend on it, especially for doing close-up focus.
Right. There's some other interesting manual focus only third-party lenses that also do macro, which could be a good option too. So you've got lots of options in E-mount if you're willing to adapt. Switching over to Canon, I
don't know if it's worth it to do. I mean, as much of a Canon shill as I am, I don't think it's worth selling
Would
your
you
kit.
just choose a side? Are you a complete 100% Canon shill, or are you willing to have
I
a
bend
little
a
bit of a
little.
gray zone in between?
Okay, son.
importantly, I do want to say, I've been harping on Jordan and on now Jaron for this as well. But with Franklin Expedition, it's a fascinating story. You still haven't watched The Terror Season 1.
Oh, it's because I kept typing in terror, not the
No,
terror,
it's not.
and
You
it didn't
liar.
show up in my
No,
search.
it's because you don't respect my opinion, and that's a shame because it's an amazing piece of TV.
He's on to us.
I'm asking for one season.
Every night, I'm like, "Do you want to watch people freeze in the Arctic?" And my wife says, "Not tonight. Tonight's not a
and
good
she's
night."
wrong because it's so compelling. The Franklin Expedition is a harrowing story, and the season 1 of The Terror follows it, gives you so much historical data. I mean, it's actually really interesting. You learn about all the pitfalls, the amount of time that these men spent out there is
Okay,
mind-boggling.
we get it. It's
no,
good.
you don't get it. So forget season 2. Season 2 is meh. But season 1 of The Terror, can you please watch it? And can everybody at home please guilt them into watching it?
I wonder if everyone at home's like, oh, I guess I should watch that too.
Yeah, I bet you Logan watched it.
Feel free to bully me on Twitter/X because I'm not on there as much anymore.
Oh,
So
yeah,
feel free to
just
give me a
ignore
hard
the
time
messages.
on
And
that.
it's got like an interesting supernatural slant, but it's not over the. It's really very good historical drama. and
I'm
it's well
I'm
done.
actually going to
And
check
Jared
it out.
Harris stars in it. I
I
mean,
love
anything
Jared
he's
Harris.
attached to is fantastic.
I
So,
could probably find an exception. Let me think.
okay,
Anyways,
but I don't know what to do with you.
this has been
I'm
great.
gonna drag up your
Jaron,
and I'm gonna
quickly.
eat you.
I know what to do. We can
Okay.
go on to the next question,
Perfect.
which
Yes.
is from DJU Group. It was an email. They say, I'm a hobbyist that has recently enrolled in the film and television master's degree to hopefully hone my skills to another level, higher my thinking about film, and hopefully might lead to a bigger things other than just a hobby. When I got on the course, I instantly bought a Sony ZV-E10, a nice little camera, but I think I may have been a bit too hasty. I hate going through the menus to think about settings, and the Nikon, this is a comment, by the way, or I guess a statement about the ZF. The Nikon looks sexy, and I can really relate to seeing the settings right in front of your eyes.
It is very sexy.
I also love taking stills.
Yeah.
Would you recommend the ZF for someone in my position, or would say a Sony A7 IV be more suitable for the money? Being a computer science teacher, I appreciate analog, even if it's pseudo analog.
Right.
Or can you recommend something better in the price range?
I mean, the first thoughts come to mind. So first off, yes, they're in the Sony ecosystem, but the ZV-E10 is an APS-C camera. So like, if you're going to go full frame, you can switch. It's fine. You're going to have to buy new lenses and all that kind of stuff anyways. I think the other thing to remember is like what we're talking about is a problem that's intrinsic with pretty much all entry-level cameras, is that often they don't have a lot of command dials, even if they're not retro designed, and you do have to go in the menus and it is a pain.
Yeah,
it is. And
those
it's
are very
slow.
capable cameras.
Sure.
I don't like using
No,
that
they're
ZV
cumbersome.
series. Yes.
Absolutely. So, but at the same time, the ZF. So we love the ZF. I love the ZF. I've been asking for the ZF. Do you love the ZF?
I'm in between on the ZF. Like it has
Okay.
very compelling video features. Like
It's a great video
yeah,
camera.
it's the Z6 III basically, but with mechanical DAWs. I'm not a huge fan of the mechanical DAWs for shooting videos.
Yes.
Like it's great. They qualify. Like we're going to be taking photos as well with this, and for that I really enjoy it. Like I shot with an X-T3 for years, but it's not that useful in video.
No.
You're not changing your ISO and your shutter speed that frequently, where those DAWs come into play, and a lot of lenses will just have aperture rings, or one of the great things with Nikon is you can turn your manual focus ring to an aperture ring on it.
Right.
So you're less dependent on that. That would be my one caveat with that.
Yeah.
As well, we're talking like the ZF is a really great price, but it's exactly the same price as the S5 II, which could totally put you through any filmmaking school. It's an incredibly capable. It's one of those right there. It's
We're-
that, hey,
One
hi,
of them
hi
shit on me.
S5 IIX.
I mean, that's a good point, is that if you're really going to go into broadcast video work, Panasonic might be a better route anyways. And
Shutter
frankly,
angle, waveform.
yes, those are the important things. Plus the fact they're perfectly capable photo cameras. I mean, they take beautiful shots. They have great autofocusing now. The ZF is absolutely sexy, but those dials are only really going to benefit you for photos. And I mean, you'd be back to using the spinny modern command dials on it anyways for video work. So you might as well get something with spinny modern command dials. And the A7 IV, it's a great camera. There's nothing wrong with it, but I feel
I just honestly, I would take a ZF over that. I really like Nikon's profiles on it, and I don't love the rolling shutter on the A7 IV. And again, the S5 II, I just keep looking at as like it's less money than an A7 IV, and I think it's a more capable video body.
S5 II, that's where we should maybe look. Yeah. I
we
wish
have-
they were sexier looking.
We had more tech questions. I'm probably and Kwang Nyo and Alistair.
Okay.
Well, let's save them for the third time that we do this podcast.
I
Jaron.
promise we
We'll
will
get
get
to
to
you.
your questions. I promise. And then I know that there were more submitted that I haven't even named it. They're sitting in my inbox waiting for me to download them and listen
Yes.
to them. I apologize.
3-hour-long podcast from now on.
We'll get to you. You guys, the two I just mentioned, you guys will be pushed to the top of the list next week.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to move on to Never Read the Comments,
All
where
right.
we have 3 comments we shouldn't have read. One of them is from, it's actually a series of
I
comments
wish I didn't read this one.
on the website from Glenn Brown, who has repeatedly, over the course of the last several months, complained about not seeing a lens hood in photos of reviewed lenses that Chris does. And he specifically says that he doesn't like looking at Chris's face in thumbnails larger than the product that he's reviewing.
Good thing I'm in a rocking chair because I'm rocking right now.
And every time that he sees these pictures of lens reviews, the lens doesn't have a lens hood. And because of it, that will be his last comment and his last visit to PetaPixel ever.
I believe he's also unsubscribing, which is a real shame.
That's too bad. I mean, first thing I want to say about Glenn is thank you for appreciating the natural beauty inherent in my face and that you don't want it to be retouched and airbrushed and all.
I
That's
think
nice.
that was his primary reason for sending this letter.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. So let's just look at it, thank you, Glenn, for appreciating my natural beauty, which is slowly fading. But damn you on the hoods, man. Like, really. So, I mean, like, shut up. Because here's the thing, right? First off, we're talking thumbnails. So in the context of a thumbnail,
he's punchier this
we'll
time.
never have to hear from him again. So here, in the context of both, other people say this too. In the context of the thumbnails, we often like to show the camera or lens next to my stupid dumb face with no hood on there because it gives you a sense of scale of how big the actual lens is. The hoods are misleading when you put them on.
Some of them are quite large.
Sure, right? Absolutely. So you see the scale in my hands, also against my big dumb face, and so that's why we do that. It's a benefit for you.
But Chris, you must never obviously ever use a lens hood if you're not showing it in the thumbnail.
All the time I do, sure. Unless I've got filters on
He's
there.
slipping into Bob Odenkirk voice, which is my
Of
favorite.
course yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, I'll go walking. I don't care. We're going to go into something else.
When we set these cameras up, we actually went and fetched the lens hood because we were seeing
It didn't
some
help.
light issues.
I can actually see the light reflecting off.
So
But it's on there.
It's on there.
Apologies for the flare. Yeah, that was...
there's some people who get really pedantic about like, oh, you should always have a hood on there because you're hurting the contrast in subtle ways. And so I'm like, honestly, I'm the photographer. Let me decide how I want to shoot my photos. I use a hood when I feel it's appropriate. I'm using a lot of filters. We're often switching. A lot of the time too, like I'll get a shot using a hood, but then when we decide to do B-roll of just like, Jordan wants to capture my majesty of taking pictures, right? To
his giant face.
Yeah, to tell
which
a narrative.
Should never be photoshopped.
Yeah, maybe the hood's not on at that time. Maybe I've taken off, put in my bags. Anyways.
I was concerned that he wasn't going to be able to repeat this with the same energy as this morning, but I am.
I think I'm even more mad now.
Yeah, it got worse.
You sound even more like Saul Goodman this time. It's great.
All right. The next question is from Tony Chan. What do you think of the decline of in-person camera stores, and especially the United States? Camera stores are, of course, impacted by online platforms in the past years, but I think the U.S. is seeing this of a more severe situation where we only have one store in every metro. And I'm going to add to this, if you're lucky.
Yes. So it's interesting, though, that they prefaced it by saying mostly in the United States, right? I mean, Canada, we do still have... Canada's a great market. I mean, it's a little bit smaller market. Well, it's a lot smaller market, but because of that, we're not quite getting the loss of that. Certainly the small mom and pop stores are hit by Amazon. They suffer from that. But I mean, the camera store, and Calgary's not a huge city. We got the camera store, we got VizTech, we got Sunil.
You have three.
But if you're in Calgary, we recommend going to the camera store.
Yeah, we prefer the camera store.
Provides us with many useful rental pieces of equipment when we're shooting our show.
But Sunil has multiple
and
stores.
My wife
like
works there.
London Drugs is another chain. They're like okay, your wife is wonderful. London Drugs is a chain that actually has groceries and computer stuff, but they have photo departments staffed by real human beings. No AI taking over there.
It is very rare to find this in the United States, and
Right.
and is this a thing in Europe too? Or stores are there?
Yeah, we hear all the time about Europe just like having no local camera stores. It's something we see in the comments all the time. And yeah, I mean, in America, like B&H and Adorama have really like alongside Amazon,
right?
So many people are just ordering stuff without getting their hands on it.
They do actually have a brick and mortar store.
Yeah, you can go into the stores, right?
But it's in one state that I'm never in.
And it's obviously the smaller areas, rural areas, small towns where these things are now basically eliminated, right? I mean, it is very easy now to watch our excellent YouTube reviews and then make a decision to buy something online. And that's a valid way.
In our excellent YouTube reviews, a lot of the time, like recently with the ZF, we said, look, this is a camera with really interesting controls. Make sure you like them if you want access to Nikon's latest features, because they're not in other cameras. So you have to make sure you enjoy the way of working that you need to with the ZF. And if you don't have a local camera store, like you are buying and returning, which is not something that we recommend. Like having worked on the retail end, that sucks and is not something that unless, you're doing it innocently.
Right.
Jaron, you had a really good solution for that.
Yeah.
Though, but it's good solution.
It's
not
a
ideal.
solution. Yeah. It's what you can do. And it's what I used to do if I was interested in a new camera is I would just rent it from Lens Rentals for a couple days, like the smallest amount they let you rent for. That gives you time to actually not only touch it and use it, which is more than beyond what you could do in a camera store.
But
You can
see
actually
the
go,
files,
you can
yeah.
go shoot with it. You
Set
can
a
decide
day
if you like it.
aside. Be like,
Yeah.
when that thing comes, I'm going to go shoot with it
Shoot
for
with
a
it,
full
see if
day.
I
Make
like it.
sure it works.
Yeah.
and it's totally
Sure.
worth your time.
It is
and
far
money.
cheaper
But-
to do that than buy a camera and then realize you hate it a month
But
or
you're
two
still
later.
missing out on the experience of like talking to a human being that
yeah.
you trust.
I'm not
and,
saying
like,
it's a better
totally,
thing.
yeah.
I would prefer camera stores still exist. It's just that the modern.
Yeah, it's just sad.
Yeah,
I
it just
get
sucks.
it.
Yeah.
You want to be able to do it. You want to go talk to somebody, ask them questions, shoot the poop.
So what
see
do
how
we
it
think
goes.
of the decline of in-person
We
camera
think
stores?
it's bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it stinks.
Time machine?
Take me back.
Straight up. 1985. Golden age.
All right, final
Of photography, anyways.
1985. I wasn't even born yet. All right.
Well,
So
okay. Wait till Jaron was born. Then go back
87.
in
Go back
time.
to 1987.
Go say hi to baby Jaron and then go talk to
Oh man, I wish we had a hood on that camera right now. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Damn it,
All right.
Glenn was right. Sorry, Glenn. We take it back. We
Final
apologize.
final
Please don't
question
unsubscribe.
as the sun glares into our hoodless lens. Techie on Threads asks me and Jordan
What
and
the hell
PetaPixel.
kind of bird is that? Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know.
That's twice I've interrupted you. I'm sorry, that was very
Techie
rude.
asked us, and not Chris though, because Chris is not on Threads. So I want a new camera bag for
Should I be-
traveling. Yes. What's your pick of travel bags? I would also ask Chris, but he isn't on this site. See, I brought it up.
Yes.
I'm leaning
I
towards the
feel
Low
disdain.
Pro Freeline 350. It looks small and not like a camera bag. So
You start, Jaron. You actually,
I used to review camera bags.
you do, and you have a ton of the different
Ton.
bags. You've tried all of them. And you
I
have
did
opinions.
for a while. There've been just too many now. A bunch more come in, and they've overwhelmed the ability to
Do I
actually
throw
review
a
them.
rock?
I'm fairly certain
terrible.
that it's going to be relatively quiet.
Oh, look, its mate has just landed next to it, and they're about to get it on.
Oh, wow,
That's
those are
beautiful.
Those are really pretty birds.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Wow,
as I was
Idaho's
saying,
an incredible state.
It is. We almost hit like 2 deer coming in here. There's like more roadkill than I've ever
answer
seen.
this question.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not into it. So the problem with bag is it's difficult to even do reviews anymore because there's too many, and
Yeah.
then they also don't move the needle. Most people don't read bag reviews anymore. The golden age of bag reviews is behind us. So
right.
I used a Peak Design bag for a really long time because there was a lot of problems with it,
Right.
but I couldn't find something that actually worked better. I would try a new bag and it was like, there's a lot of things about this that are worse or the same as the other bag, and the other bag does a couple things better. So I stopped. What I'm using right now is a Gura Gear Kiboko City traveler bag.
Right.
And it's smaller. It doesn't necessarily look like a camera bag, but it's,
No.
they all kind of look like that.
Okay, so, but actually it's compact. So
It is
when
pretty
you showed
compact.
me your Gura Gear bag, I remember the Gura Gears. It was a larger, thicker bag. Like it was barely airline compatible. Yours is a little bit more
Mine goes
compact.
under the chair in front of me.
Yeah.
But it still fits this laptop. This is the larger one, right? This
Yeah,
is
like
16.
16 high
16.
roller.
Yeah, it goes in there. It fits a camera. It also fits. If you watched the podcast from a few weeks ago, we talked about our favorite stuff that we have that's camera related, and I had a Peak Design tech pouch that fits in there. The top is it's magnetic and it folds over. The only thing I really don't like about this bag is that the way to manage the straps is a couple places. It's like these weak magnets
Right.
that are about the strength of the ones where you print them out like your kid's picture and you put it on the refrigerator.
Oh, yeah, those suck.
They're not very strong.
And then
They're
you find it under the fridge every
Yeah,
every,
that's-
You get a
every other
magnet.
day.
You want
I
like
want a magnet. I want a magnet. I want it to stick. And these ones don't do that.
Yeah.
So I wish they had gone with a stronger magnet so that I actually had to like really pull it apart. I like the idea of magnets, but when you're folding stuff into it and it's got pressure behind it, it's going to flip out if it's not
Right.
strong. So
like you will when your stuff isn't in your bag.
He'll flip out.
Uh,
Now, we've played with a lot of bags, but I know Jordan's going to be Team Think Tank because that's all you use. You're the
I
most.
mean, it
like,
works for me.
loyal-
Like I've got an Airport International. I stuff all my junk in there. As soon as I get to the location, I pull out my Think Tank Urban Disguise shoulder bag. I love shoulder bags. I don't like backpacks at all. I want to be able to reach down and grab everything. And I put as much as I possibly can in
Right.
that, to like the huge disservice of my back, my shoulders. I'm a broken shell of a man because of the way I carry things, but I have quick access to everything. And it
You
works
love
for
it.
me. And I will not change in this one way.
Yeah, I know you're very
it's
loyal.
funny,
You're very
it's just
loyal.
I would rather have less stuff and deal with less stuff than carry around a messenger. I hate messengers.
My main,
Bags. You're fine with messengers,
Yeah, I
like
keep
bringing
it.
things
Yeah.
Don't
to
kill the
you.
messenger.
just
the
the bag.
bags.
Throw the bag there. My main thing is I need the bag to be lightweight because there's a lot of backpacks and bags that come out where the bag itself is already heavy before
Peak
you
Design.
even put it into gear. Peak Design. Yeah, I'm not a big fan, honestly. I'm sorry. I know the vast majority of people are now going to.
They make good stuff. It's just
Yeah.
that their bags are not fantastic.
I don't love them. So I want a lightweight bag. So actually my personal favorite I've been using for quite a few years now is Wotancraft. They make fantastic stuff, particularly the Pilot series. It's like this neat amalgamation of sort of like vintage military, kind of like World War II-ish kind of military look. It's funky, but lightweight, rugged. I'm going to try
This ain't
something.
your daddy's military. It's your granddaddy's military.
Granddaddy's
Don't touch
military
it.
bag.
Don't do it.
No, I'm doing it.
It's a fragile thing, Chris. This is going to collapse the whole.
No idea.
Yeah, so here's my Wotancraft
Don't touch
backpack.
it.
This is look at all the stuff I can it's good. I can stick all these things on the front. I like that. This magnet clasp on here is fantastic. This mini review. This is a great bag. And it looks sexy, right? And it comes in different colors and it doesn't say Think Tank on it.
This episode not brought to you by Wotancraft.
But I do legitimately love their bag. So yeah.
Man, my jerry-rigged stand is I should have given myself more credit. I thought it needed that bag to stay stable, and yet here it is.
For now.
Well, that's good. We're at the end of the podcast, so it made it.
We did it.
The gaffer tape's about to get peeling off.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
It's making us
so I'll catch the mic.
sound.
But we got
the heels back.
Yeah. So, I mean, thank you for putting up with this. We have done this podcast now twice.
This one was better.
I actually think I feel better about this one too.
Oh, there you go. Good. Yes.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks again to our
We should
sponsor,
do
OM
every
System.
podcast 2 times.
Oh my God. I would prefer not. At any rate, hopefully you enjoyed watching yet another in-person podcast. If not, too bad. But also next week we'll be back in our regular positions in our basements. I'm very excited to get back to my basement
Yeah,
personally.
perfect. And no more comments about it. Thank you.
Oh no, I think that lens is flaring again.
Once the light is right into the lens, it doesn't matter how many hoods you have on it. We're all good.
Right. Catch you next time, everyone.
Bye.
Kisses.